Hi, my name's Dave Flynn and thanks for watching my bass collection, and today we're taking a look at my Squire JV series precision bass, or Fender Squire JV series precision bass, or as some people tend to call it, the Squire reissues. Regardless of what you call it, basically the JV series instruments and that whole serial numbering is really the start of the precursor of the whole Squire branding, and the start of the whole Squire range, I suppose. So it's worth just having a look at that, and particularly this kind of instrument, because these JV series instruments were basically, I suppose, a superior instrument to, and quite different to what we would consider to the Squire as we know it today. I'm not going to go into the whole sort of idea about the precision bass and its whole contribution, I suppose, to bassdom and all of those sorts of things, because I did a sort of an episode of that as a bit of a precursor to this anyway. So have a look at that, and that will give you a bit of a flavour of kind of the precision bass itself. And sort of leading up to this, but I suppose looking at this, the Squire bass, particularly, I suppose we're talking around 1979. So the precision bass has been around for about 30 years, and at the time when this was produced. The problem was that Fender were finding themselves in a bit of a dilemma, in the fact that they were losing instrument sales in America, but particularly over in overseas markets, and they were doing this to, I suppose, from the influx of Japanese and Asian copies that were being made of not just their instruments, but of Gibson and Rickenbacker as well. Now, there were some really good instruments and there were some really bad instruments. All in all, I suppose the problem was that the idea of copyright and registered trademarks and all of those sorts of things didn't obviously translate that well into those markets, and it was open slaver in terms of what they were sort of copying. And if you were a musician, or like myself, from that 80s period, you'd go into your local music shop and there would be instruments that would come and go, brand names that would just come and go all the time, copies of kind of like your favourite ones. And there were lots of names and things top of my head that I can think of were things like Morris and Hondo and Onyx and Emperor, and you probably know yourself, they were all in sort of various markets and just depending upon where you were. But all the things they all had in common was that there were good ones and there were bad ones. Sometimes Hondo, for instance, I can remember you could put two exactly the same instruments side by side that look exactly the same, but to actually play one would be really good, one would be really bad. You just had to really be careful about and basically play everyone till you found one that you liked. That was the issue with it, as opposed to something like an American-made Fender or Gibson that you could probably pick up off the shelf, and you were pretty much assured that you were playing a quality instrument. Some notables that sort of come out of that, though, that we forget about. Ibanez started their whole life basically as producing copies of Fender, Gibson and Rickenbacker instruments. If you've got one of those older ones from those early 80s, you'll know how good they are, and they made some great instruments. Some of those Gibson Les Pauls and some of those Rickenbackers that they made were really great instruments. And if you've got an old Ibanez Strat or a P bass, you'll know, or jazz bass, you'll know what they were like. They were just very good instruments. Another one that came out of that period was Tokai as well. Tokai went that little bit extra and essentially changed their whole logo to mimic that of Fender's, so that from a distance it even looked like the Fender logo, even though it had a T instead of the F. They changed it just enough to make it look like it, and it had the same lettering and the same scrolling and everything. It was amazing. So this is where Fender finds themselves. So they've already tried in sort of a localized kind of way to produce a lower branded, a lower priced instrument, and they did that with the Strat and a couple of those things, and they sort of tried a sort of bit in from Japan, having them built in Japan and then shipping them back across to the US, but they just couldn't compete in terms of price with these influx of copies. So I suppose I've said previously, in a sort of a can't beat them, join them kind of a way, I suppose, Fender decides the best way to compete is basically to start operations in the local market. So they set up Fender Japan. Now, the other thing that we should think about is that Fender had previously in the 1960s purchased the then Squire music company, which was basically a musical instrument string manufacturer. And they've purchased this company, but basically shelved it, lock, stock and barrel, and left it on the shelf. So when they established Fender Japan in 1979, 1980, they looked to the Squire brand as being the vehicle to launch their these Japanese instruments. Now, the idea was, unlike Squire today, the idea was that Squire then, or Fender Japan, would be the vehicle for producing or reproducing or reissuing older instruments that Fender America had stopped producing and from their back catalogues. So basically, this is where we sort of come from, and for the JV series, and the first ones that they released through Fender Japan were the 57 Precision, like this one. There was a 62 Precision, there was a 62 jazz bass, and I think there was a Strat and a Telecaster as well that went in there. So they were the kind of instruments that they were looking at, and the idea was that they were going to be a really a higher end or a superior version of these Japanese copies and Asian copies that were already being made, but obviously at a lower price. Now, to kick all of this off, Fender, who had already sort of done this a little bit previously, basically shipped across American parts to be assembled in Japan for then redistribution. That changed as things went along, obviously, and production started up better, and Fender could then produce their own. And Fender Japan could actually sort of survive on their own. But to start with, Fender America basically sent across all these bits and pieces. So these JV series instruments are essentially American parts assembled in Japan and then redistributed again. So what you've got is really an American-made instrument, an American instrument assembled in Japan. That's essentially what the JV series is. And they're just as good as any of their American counterparts. That's the brilliant thing about this instrument. In terms of the instrument itself, well, this one's no different to any other 57 that you could probably get out there. It's an older body. It's an all maple neck fingerboard. This one has a vintage sunburst. And on these JV series models, I think it was only a vintage sunburst that was offered. I don't think there was any other colour that was out there. It's one pickup, obviously, one tone, one volume control. Now the pickup is built supposedly to the same specs as the original line in 57, so same wax and same kind of wiring and everything else. And when we look at the electronics of it, which is one volume, one tone control, it's pretty hot. I mean, it's as hot as any active that I have in my collection. And in terms of playing through your own amplifier, you could even find yourself having to plug this into your active pad or active channel on your rig, because it does put out such a high output. And I should say, if you've looked at my my episode on the Squire HM series 5-string that I've got there, this is the kind of sound on the pickup that really should be in that instrument to give it the balls that instrument needed. But this is classic basically P-bass sound. And really all the tonal quality comes from whereabouts where you obviously play on the instrument. So if you play back here on the up at the bridge, then obviously you're going to get a tighter kind of sound. So it's kind of a, and you get that tighter sound, and you can get the idea of that. If you kind of play over the pickup, which is kind of probably more what you'd kind of call that classic P-bass sound, you're kind of going to get that. You get that kind of idea, a bit of sting there. But you get that idea. The nice thing too about it is you can feel, you get a real sense of feedback from this instrument as well, through the body and through the neck, which is great. And it is just a bolt-on neck, as you can kind of see there as well. You can also see on the finish on the back of that as well, you can kind of see after 30 years of this instrument it's kind of wearing a bit, but it survived quite well over all of that time. So in terms of finish and that kind of side of things, yeah, it lasts quite well. If I play up here on the further up here on the wood, and you kind of get that sort of more jazz kind of jazz tone that comes out of it. There's a little bit of buzzing there, and mine can probably do with a bit of a fret dressing and a bit of setup. So there's a little bit of buzz there. That's probably more me than the instrument itself. It also has, I should say, has these, just like the 57, has these open back tuners. It's got that funny button, the strap button up on there as well, which I don't know if that's exactly what the 57s were. When the time when I bought it, I was told that's what the original 57s were like. Haven't seen that on original like on all original 57s, but there are some variations within that. This is all stock from when I bought it. The only thing that's changed is the pick guard, which was a single layered white pick guard when I bought it, so it's that kind of particular classic sort of precision based kind of look. But it broke after a couple of years because of that single layer. And just the use that I was doing with it. So I replaced it with this black one basically because I just was sick of seeing other people with similar basses to mine with the white pickguard. I just wanted to be a little bit different. But that was just me. But it's such a simplistic instrument, and that's the great thing about the P-bass is that it's just that one pickup, and it's just the two controls, and that's all it is. And that's what that is the thing that makes it such a great instrument. And it's where, as I've said in my other episode there, that it's where all other basses came from after that, the simplistic design that it actually is. The only other thing I can sort of say about it is, in terms of the neck, it's you'll find that these 57s, and there are other versions around now, later versions of the P-bass, but this 57 one particularly has a very wide neck to it, and you can probably see it there anyway. They call it I think they call it a D shape, I think is what they tend to call it. But it is a very flat neck to it. Great though when you're learning, because it basically forces you to put your fingers in sort of in the right place, because it has got that flat sort of thing and your sort of arm sort of sticks out a bit. The trade-off is though that it has got a wide string spacing to it, which is wider than you would say find on the jazz bass, and you'd find on some later P basses as well. So while it's probably good for sort of slap pop, for people like me, I can get my fingers around that a lot better. But yeah, you'll find that you're kind of having to stretch a bit further with that as well. So that's just one of the trade-offs that you kind of have to you sort of have to think of about that. But it's a great feel and a great sound. If you're looking at this as a kind of like a first instrument, or looking at it as an instrument for yourself, well, you can't go wrong with the P-bass. I mean, the P-bass has been in every genre of music and every style. So as a first instrument, it's certainly one that you just can't go wrong with. This is the instrument that I bought as my first instrument, and it's the one that I learnt off 30 years ago and gigged with as well. So this still contains all the battle scars and everything that comes along with that. In terms of weight and balance, it's great. No problem at all. If you're looking at one today, day though, the problem with the JV series, it probably suffers a little bit from this Squire logo these days, and particularly if you've kind of inherited one, or you've come across it, you may not be aware of the JV sort of heritage that sort of comes by it. And the JV, from what I can see, I mean, I've read a couple of things. Joint venture is one that I've heard JV stands for. Japanese vintage is what I've heard it called as well. Whatever it is, just remember that the JV lettering basically signifies the fact that these are the very first Squires that came out. So just remember, and it's as good. It's basically an American instrument assembled in Japan. That's kind of the way it is. And that's the unfortunate thing. If you look at Squire today has just really become what it really wasn't set out to be. Basically Fender are doing basically what the Japanese counterparts were doing in the 80s, making copies of their own instruments. And sadly, some of those are good copies, some of those are bad copies, and that's the problem with it. Unlike these instruments, which were basically built as superior instruments to those copies that were out there, it's now come sort of like a full circle. You don't see too many Japanese manufacturers building copies of Fender instruments. You basically find Fender building copies of Fender instruments. I think that's kind of that's quite funny. The other thing is Fender has become such a multicultural kind of company, or Squire has become such a multicultural kind of thing, that this Squire label, particularly for this JV series, get caught up in all of that, and they get looked at in the same kind of in that same kind of vein. Oh, some are good, some are bad. And so it's a good thing if you're looking at one at the moment. You could probably score one as a bargain if you find someone who doesn't really know much about it. So have a look at that as well. But if you can pick up one of these JV ones, you are picking up an instrument that's just as good as any American-made Fender of its time, or even today. The closest that you would probably get to the same today of the same quality is probably an American standard. And you certainly wouldn't be paying the same price. You'd be paying, this would be going at least half the price of that, or probably even less. So that's something to consider. And if you have any sort of comments about that, or you think I'm sort of overstating it a little bit, feel free to give a few comments down the bottom there. But I don't think I'm far wrong for that. And have a look at a few threads on the internet too about it. You'll find that everyone tends to agree. And if you've got one of these, you know what I'm sort of talking about as well. Sound, quality, build, everything's just great about it. And you can't go wrong. That's my take on the Fender Squire, and I hope you've enjoyed that. Have a look at some of my other episodes that are out there as well. My episode on the Hofner violin bass seems to be very popular at the moment, so thank you for that, and thank you for leaving comments as well. I appreciate all of those comments and words of encouragement that people are kind of like saying as well. Have a look at some of the other ones. Coming up is my Roland GR77 episode as well. I'm just working on that at the moment because I think it's going to take a few episodes to cover some of that, particularly because it does come in a couple of things, the module and the controller as well, and just a few things like that. But stay around for that, because that will be coming up soon. So thanks for watching. Thanks. I hope you've enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll catch up with you later on. Cheers.